You can legally bury a family member in your own backyard in 37 states. No funeral home required. No casket salesman standing over you. Just a shovel, a death certificate, and a right most Americans have no idea they hold. But there's a specific reason almost nobody actually does it, and it has nothing to do with health codes. Here's the part that surprises people first. Only 3 states in the entire country flatly outlaw home burial by name: California, Indiana, and Washington. Everywhere else, the ground beneath your property is not automatically off limits to your own dead. That single fact contradicts almost everything people assume about American death law. And once you understand why the myth exists in the first place, you start to see who benefited from you believing it. This isn't really a story about cemeteries. It's a story about the little guy, a grieving family with a shovel and a plot of land, going up against a 150-year-old industry that built itself on convincing you that burying your own dead was somehow illegal, unsanitary, or beneath you. It wasn't ever fully true, but a lot of powerful people needed you to think it was. Before the 1860s, death care in America was entirely a family affair. Relatives washed and dressed their own dead. Bodies lay in repose in the front parlor. Burial happened in the churchyard down the road or the back corner of the family farm. There was no industry standing between a family and a grave, because the industry didn't exist yet. The Civil War changed that. Soldiers were dying hundreds of miles from home, and their families wanted bodies shipped back for burial. Bodies that had to survive a multi-day train ride without decomposing. Chemical embalming, first with arsenic and mercury, and later with formaldehyde, solved that problem, and it turned out to be extremely profitable. That's where the first complication enters the story. After the war, morticians didn't stay tradespeople and cabinet makers. They rebranded themselves as sanitary science professionals and started marketing chemical preservation as a public health necessity, even though nothing about an unembalmed body posed the danger they claimed. Decomposing remains do not trigger disease outbreaks. Soil breaks down microbes quickly. The World Health Organization has said as much. But public health sold better than personal preference, so public health is the language the industry chose. Over the following decades, state trade associations lobbied legislatures to create funeral licensing boards, and staffed those boards with the same funeral directors the boards were supposed to regulate. By 1950, when the federal government standardized how deaths were reported nationally, the funeral director had been written directly into the paperwork as a required middleman between a doctor's death certificate and the state registrar. That's the machinery still running today, and it's worth naming what it actually is: regulatory capture. The pattern where an industry ends up writing the rules meant to police it. The legal map that resulted splits into 3 tiers. 9 to 10 states, including New York, Louisiana, Illinois, and Michigan, legally require a licensed funeral director to handle key steps of disposition, like filing paperwork or supervising transport, even if they don't ban home burial outright. 3 states ban it completely, and in the remaining 37, state law recognizes something called the common law right of next of kin, the legal principle that a family member can act as their own person acting as funeral director, filing the paperwork and handling the body without hiring anyone. Even in the 37 states where the right exists, county zoning boards are the real gatekeepers, not state health departments. Many counties require a private family cemetery to sit on 2 to 20 acres, roughly the footprint of 15 football fields, which instantly disqualifies most suburban and urban lots. Setback rules push graves 50 to 100 feet from property lines, up to 350 feet from a neighbor's house, close to the length of a football field, and as far as half a mile from a well or a reservoir. Depth requirements demand 18 to 36 inches of packed soil over the body. And once a grave goes in, the exact location has to be recorded on the property deed with the county clerk, permanently, which is why mortgage lenders and title insurers frequently balk at financing land with an informal grave on it. Having the right on paper and being able to use it turned out to be two very different fights. And the part that turns this from a legal curiosity into a real civil rights battle is still ahead. Two recent fights show exactly how this plays out. In Blackhoof Township, Minnesota, a proposal for a 20-acre green burial ground drew fierce local opposition over groundwater fears and property values. The state legislature responded by freezing all new green burial grounds statewide for 2 years. The Council on American Islamic Relations publicly objected, pointing out that traditional Muslim and Jewish burial customs depend on exactly the kind of unembalmed, direct-to-earth burial the moratorium blocked. In a Michigan township, officials banned private and green burials outright. A judge struck the ban down as unconstitutional at the end of 2024. So the township tried again in 2025, this time using extreme setback distances instead of an outright ban. It lost the legal fight and won anyway. It is switched from a statute to a tape measure. Then there's the part of this story that made it all the way to federal court. For decades, state funeral boards made it a crime for anyone without a mortuary license to sell a casket, meaning grieving families could be legally barred from buying a plain wooden box from anyone but a licensed funeral home. In 2002, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals struck that down in Craigmiles versus Giles, ruling that Tennessee's law requiring 2 years of embalming school just to sell a box had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with protecting an industry from competition. 10 years later, the Fifth Circuit reached the same conclusion in St. Joseph Abbey versus Castile, when a community of Benedictine monks in Louisiana was blocked from selling the handmade wooden caskets that funded their monastery. The court ruled unanimously that protecting a business from competition is not a legitimate reason for a law to exist. Both courts said the same thing in different words. State boards had been writing rules to protect an industry, not the public. And in both cases, the people who fought back, independent casket sellers, monks, won. That win matters because of what it exposed. Once federal courts started striking down casket monopolies as unconstitutional economic protectionism, the same scrutiny started landing on the broader assumption that families need a licensed intermediary at every step of burying their own dead. The myth cracked. The paperwork underneath it didn't automatically change, but the legal foundation holding the myth up did. And the reform is still moving. Washington State, one of only 3 states with an outright home burial ban, introduced legislation in 2025 to let landowners establish private family burial grounds with clear setback rules and mandatory deed disclosure instead of a blanket prohibition. New Jersey is rewriting its Mortuary Science Act to let people become licensed for family consultation without forcing them through a full embalming curriculum they'll likely never use. Colorado overhauled its mortuary licensing system in 2024 and 2025 after regulatory failures at unlicensed commercial facilities, building clearer legal paths for families who want to handle disposition themselves. 14 states have now legalized natural organic reduction, a regulated process that turns human remains into soil over 30 to 60 days, giving urban and suburban families a legal, eco-conscious option that sidesteps zoning fights over in-ground graves entirely. The money gap explains why any of this matters to people who will never read a zoning ordinance. A traditional funeral and burial runs $8,850 to $20,700 once you add the non-declinable overhead fee, embalming, a casket, the plot, a concrete vault, and the opening and closing of the grave, close to a full year's rent in the average American apartment. A private home burial, where it's legally possible, runs $150 to $1,000. Not a discount, a different order of magnitude. If you're the executor of a family member's estate, or you're the one who'll be making these calls someday, 3 things are worth knowing right now. Check which of the 3 legal tiers your state falls into before you assume anything is or isn't allowed. If home burial is legal where you live, the county zoning office, not the state health department, is where your actual answer lives. So call them before you call anyone else. And if acreage or setback rules rule out your land, natural organic reduction is now a legal option in 14 states and growing, without the zoning fight at all. The court rulings, the state reforms, the shrinking list of banned states, all of it points the same direction. For 150 years, an industry convinced a country that burying your own family was something you needed a license to do. Courts have now said repeatedly that was never fully true. What's left is a patchwork of local rules that are slowly, unevenly catching up to a right that was there the entire time. Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how many of you are sitting on land where this is already legal and just didn't know it. If you want more of these, subscribe, because next week we're covering the clause buried in almost every apartment lease that lets a landlord walk into your home without warning you first, and why it's still legal in 28 states.